Despite record high revenue collection, public services are at their worst. I, for example, left Spain because I realized that people didn't want to be free, and that in the end, all people wanted was to screw me over. And if they could screw me over as much as possible, even better. It pisses me off that they have people who haven't paid a single damn cent in taxes. Not a single damn cent. Content from Africa receives free healthcare, hotel stays, and benefits upon arrival, while tax-paying Spaniards are overlooked, according to the speaker. Moreover, Andorra's insurance is covering his treatment. They'll likely criticize him, saying, "Now you come back here?" So what, were they supposed to just let your son die?
Let's go over Sanchez's track record a bit since he came to the government. He pardoned despite saying he wouldn't. He made concessions to separatists after denying he would. He's in government thanks to a deal with Bildu, which he said he'd never make. He told the people of Valencia to literally ask for help if they needed it. That's one of the most infamous phrases in Spain's democracy. Yesterday, he appeared 6 hours after a widespread blackout across the whole country, and his statement was, "We don't know anything."
I can't fire civil servants, but I can replace them with technology. I will instruct civil servants to work from home while still receiving their salaries as I establish a digitalized administration. When they when they retire, that's it. We won't hire anymore. Do you get paid for staying at home? It's absolutely parasitic to say I'm getting paid by taking advantage of a flaw in the system that lets me get paid without doing anything. I mean, how can you live with a clear conscience and sleep peacefully knowing that you're a literal damn parasite?
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of La Factoria. Today we have the great pleasure of having Victor Dominguez with us, a reference for the entire liberal and conservative wing. Let him define that himself, more or less. Welcome back, Victor. Thank you for returning.
This episode has a lot of history behind it, huh?
Have you had many female friends, sir?
Some.
One day I'll tell what happened, but Holy Virgin in the end. Well, I have to thank you for coming because, let's see, I'll tell you the truth. This episode has already been recorded. And our system crashed, my sound technician's software crashed here, and absolutely all the content was lost. And thanks to Victor being a great person, and
He cares about me.
he agreed to record it again. That's all, gentlemen.
Now we'll see if we get the same podcast or a different one. Yeah, because
The truth is, I remember very well how that episode went, and it was awesome. Regardless, I believe God intended for us to record it again, and this version will be much improved. Well, Victor, the first thing I want to say is what a crazy situation. Today is Tuesday the 29th, and yesterday was Monday the 28th. For the first time in history that I can remember, there has been a widespread blackout across all of Spain. A while ago, you started posting memes of a lady with a match and a pot saying, "At least they're not in charge." The
far right, no. Has the meme come true? You know that meme isn't mine, right? It's from Rejon. Rejon posted it back then. I can't believe it. I don't remember exactly when it was. He was left-leaning and didn't self-reflect. After a negative event, he posted a meme saying, "And at least the far right isn't in power." And it's literally like that. Look, I also think that what happened yesterday shows us just how dependent we are right now on everything digital. By cutting the power, you literally paralyze everything.
But Victor, one thing. You and I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, you and I and many other people who you could call cultural warriors, social critics on the internet, whatever you want. We have several fronts open. One, those damn electric cars. We are against that ecological transition that the European Union wants to make. We are against the digital currency, the digital euro that the agenda wants to impose. 2030. Ultimately, this has been excellent for us to highlight and say, look, you bunch of bastards. If these guys' plans go through, we're going to be way more unprepared in case of a network failure.
Supply is a key factor, but there are many other dependencies as well. The issue with electric cars isn't the vehicles themselves, but rather the forced imposition of them. If you want an electric car, go ahead and buy one. The thing is, don't take away my combustion car if I want to have a combustion car. And above all, don't make a regulation that forces manufacturers to have to make hybrid cars just so they can get tax exemptions. Don't restrict certain cars from entering downtown Madrid. You can enter with a Ferrari, but not a C15, which makes no sense. And in the end, certain dynamics are created where you incentivize most people to have to change their car for this type of vehicle, when on top of that, you don't even have the infrastructure fully prepared to meet this kind of demand. And then at the same time, it's funny because you want to increase electricity demand, but then you're shutting down nuclear power plants, and you want to keep everything running on renewable energy. Renewable energy is a good support, but not a reliable base, and it creates significant dependency. on how the day is. After all, with solar energy, there's not as much of a problem, but with wind energy, it really depends on the conditions. In the end, you must have all your bases covered. It's not about being for or against renewables. It's a matter of, see, let's be consistent and understand that nuclear is a clean energy, a super profitable energy, and it can be the foundation that supports then the rest. And then rely on other types of energy that are totally feasible and can be really good, you know? I mean, it doesn't really make much sense to be demolishing dams, you know? When the infrastructure is already built and working. So I think in the end, especially also what you were saying about the digital euro and all that, we have to understand that digital is very convenient. It's not about fighting against it, as people always seek convenience, which is the natural course we must understand. Even if you tell them, with this you'll be safe, your money will be yours, and you'll be sovereign over this money. Is it someone who knows about Bitcoin telling you this? Someone who comes from the crypto environment? People desire simplicity and are unconcerned about the source of the money or their lack of freedom. This is a black pill, as I call it. If you like black pills, the black pill is understanding that most people don't want to be free. Freedom implies they want to be safe, yes, but to be safe within a sense of security, which isn't real. Because look at the case of Dana. People believe the state is there to help them and to respond to these situations. Or that it's capable and that whatever problem they might have, it's going to help them. And what we see is that we're at a record high in tax collection and public services are worse than ever. It's a curious thing. And in the end, I think nobody stops to reflect on it. That is, they have more and more of your money and you have less and less ability to save. You can't become independent. You literally don't have a life project and the government has more of your money. And the country isn't doing any better, and you don't have better public services either. It's very dangerous when we start normalizing these kinds of things and say, this is just how it is. And well, this is just how it is. And one day the power goes out all day and we've normalized it and absolutely nothing happens. Well, I think we're facing a future, especially with the issue of the digital euro. In theory, I think they're going to start introducing it from October. If I remember correctly, it's a challenge we have ahead of us to see how people handle it, you know? People may adopt it well, and if they do, it'll be difficult to go against that general trend of widespread adoption. No matter how much they tell you, aren't you going to be free? Think about it. We're dealing with a population that doesn't want to be free. So you're waging a cultural battle to tell people who don't want to be free. And you have to be very careful with all of this. Because I, for example, left Spain because I realized that people didn't want to be free. And that people, in the end, all they wanted was to screw me over. They aim to take maximum advantage of me. It's important to realize that the typical socialist
wants to screw you over as much as possible? 100%.
He would rather see you do badly than see the country do well. Is that so? I mean, he enjoys doing you harm and trying to make sure you're not in the position you're in, trying to take your money away, trying to do any kind of thing that makes him feel better about himself, about his miserable existence. Miserable people often want others to be just as unhappy as they are. They don't want to improve their own lives, but instead wish for everyone else to experience the same misery. Considering this, do you understand they have a fake one? Let's say it's a fake one. A message of solidarity that may not be genuinely supportive. They want to exploit you to elevate themselves, saying, I'm doing great, but I live off your money, at your expense, and thanks to your work. And you? They continue providing incentives to create more value. This is interesting, as it's a common trend on social media, where they consistently attempt this approach, like stigmatizing or making less of the work you can do or that I do. It's like they always tell me, you don't work, right? If I don't work, then why do I pay taxes? Take away my taxes. If I don't work, then don't tell me I don't work. But then you want to charge me taxes. So what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? If it's an activity that generates money, isn't that working? I mean, they're stuck in that mindset of, I don't like what you do. I say what you do isn't real work, that this is just old-fashioned stuff, you know? Working is digging in a mine. And any other money-making activity you dislike isn't considered work. Is that right? Often, in their situation, they literally have fewer years of contributions. I won't make the analogy. Go ahead, Victor, do it. Don't worry about losing your channel.
Well, it doesn't matter. Listen,
They've censored us.
What a week, this town.
Let's just say they don't have many years of contributions. They come to lecture you when you've generated a lot of money, you're creating jobs, and you're adding your own capital, about how you have to do things, or how you have to, let's say, be... When they're people who aren't in a position to give advice to anyone, they're not in a position to give advice about anything at all. And they're the same ones who tell you no, right? If you're not a woman, don't comment on women's issues. If you're not gay, don't comment on gay issues, okay? If you haven't created a job, don't talk about my company, how to create jobs, or how to manage businesses. You lack knowledge about building a business. Have you ever independently earned a single euro? Your business model involves seeking government funding to subsidize your product because customers are unwilling to buy it, even with the subsidy. Like, it often happens in the culture sector where in the end you have a business that has become normal for the taxpayer to finance, when maybe, I don't know, why not do the same with a regular entrepreneur?
Such a thing is utterly inconceivable in a nation like the United States. I talked to you about it when I went to X-Cancel. We're not big fans of Hollywood, and that fact,
I've seen that.
conversation should know that, but do you like Hollywood more? Do you like it less? If they want to do a sloppy job making Snow White brown and making the queen much prettier, if they want to put dwarfs that look like they were taken from a cheap PlayStation 1 video game, well, you take your risks by making Snow White woke, but the losses are assumed by the private sector. These idiots want to make a parody of the Civil War with our money. They want to make a parody of anything. They want to laugh at Spaniards who don't think like them with our money. Amusingly, they profit while we bear the losses as they don't receive a single euro.
Besides, it doesn't dignify their work. Because in the end, I think the artist always has to be someone free who expresses, let's say, who... It's challenging for artists to maintain a rebellious stance if they are subsidized by the government that ultimately pays them, as it may compromise their freedom and independence. It just doesn't make any damn sense, does it?
I had an argument with a very good friend of mine, I won't mention her name, who works on television. And she said, but it's art, it's cultures. And I was like, okay, fine. So should I just tape a banana to a corkboard with some tape? I believe the government should compensate me for my art as it's part of our culture. However, they are selective and tend to favor certain individuals. Usually, if Almodovar started criticizing Pedro Sanchez today, you already know who would be more aligned with their message. I'm telling you that. They refuse to give him any public funding for his failed projects.
Yes, besides, this also contaminates the sector because it forces everyone to be the same way. As in journalism and other sectors, making a good living is necessary, and that's why I talk about dignifying this kind of work, these kinds of jobs again. Because they have literally prostituted them, and they still, maybe they're not aware of it yet, but they are prostitutes of their own sector. It's like an absolute dictatorship within your sector. Either you think this way, or you don't have a job. Supposedly, we have a law that prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation, ideology, gender, or any other characteristic. So why is it normalized in certain sectors? If there are people who think a certain way, does that mean they can't perform well at work? And are they shut out? This issue needs to be addressed.
Moreover, they face prosecution as seen with Nacho Cano.
Yes, and we're also talking about people who champion diversity, all kinds of diversity except intellectual diversity. So we talk about diversity of skin color, but everyone has to think the same. Like, we can't have intellectual diversity. God forbid we end up with that, which is ultimately the most important and healthiest diversity.
They only care about superficial diversity, just like you.
Well said.
Of sexual orientation, of skin color.
Let me tell you, diversity of identity is important from an external perspective. Is that as long as you agree with me ideologically, if not, I'm not interested. I mean, if you're a black person on the right, I'm not
interested in you. No.
You're an Uncle Tom.
I insult you, I call you a damn Nima Al, like Isabel Pardo Vera in Dongo. That's the problem, and that's something that amazes me. Infoblogger refers to people on the left using the slur faggot repeatedly. Just because they don't agree with their ideas. I mean, being racist, being homophobic, wishing rape on a woman. For someone like Isabel Diaz Ayuso, it's justified as long as the person is right-wing.
Let me tell you, what I've recently seen on Twitter appears miserable. What happened on Twitter? What happened on Twitter? Tell me a little bit. I don't know. Did you know that a guy named Blanco became a father? Oh, really? Hey, congratulations. But let me tell you something. The baby had some kind of condition for which they had to transfer him from the hospital where he was born in Andorra to Barcelona using the Andorra insurance. The child's treatment. And those people on Twitter, how can anyone be so miserable? Look, I see this, but what happened? Are people on Twitter insulting Sergio? Yeah, now you come here asking us for resources. I don't know what it is. Like, dude, he's paying for it, isn't he? It's unclear if he's paying for it, which is worse since he already paid when in Spain. It pisses me off that they have people who haven't paid a damn cent in taxes, not a damn cent. Immigrants from Africa receive healthcare, hotel accommodations, and comprehensive benefits. They then take a Spaniard who has already contributed to the system, and additionally, Andorran insurance is covering his treatment. They'll point at him saying, now you're coming back here? They say awful things, like they should have let your son die. When I see these people, I just see that they're miserable. I mean, I put myself in the position of being ideologically in a place similar to theirs, and it would never occur to me to make light of someone else's child or someone else's life or their family member. I mean, we're talking about a human issue, And these people are only human when it suits them. That is, if it's some guy from El Maghreb, then I'm interested because for whatever political reason, I'll go after him. Yeah, we'll even go to someone's house if necessary. If a tax-paying Spaniard's son must die, I have to tell him, even if I'm not ideologically interested. It's just how it is. It's enough to make you want to confront them directly and say it to my face, and because that's just being miserable, man. I was watching and saw Sergio. I didn't say anything, but if I were him, I would have never gotten involved in all this. He got into an unnecessary conflict and kept arguing, despite being in a situation where he didn't need to argue with those people. They're bad people. I've seen the bad side of these people in the sense that I don't want to contribute to these people having a welfare state. I want to get out of the system, and when the system can be demolished, maybe I'll take part in it. But I don't want to participate. Those who dedicate themselves to using public resources to demonize and wish harm upon me. We're discussing this. We're talking about they take your money, go to Spanish television, put your face up there with a target on it, and start pointing at you. La Sexta, it's just as I mentioned in Congress recently. We've normalized the existence of a program that absolutely persecutes people. On La Sexta, you might say it's private money. Nonsense! They get institutional advertising from everywhere. Do you think La Sexta would be the way it is if it didn't get as much money as it does? Besides, Grupo Tres Media plays both sides. Grupo Tres Media has Antena Tres, where Vicente Vallés tells you one thing, and then they have La Sexta, where they tell you something else. You know? So imagine if I start a show now, call it whatever, and start pointing out journalists. Imagine what they would say. Fascism, putting targets on the heads of whistleblowers. Of hoax spreaders and poisoners, I would literally be Mussolini. If I did that, they would criticize me. But we have normalized having a television show on La Sexta that is dedicated to pointing out individual citizens who express their opinions. Whether you like it or not, dedicating a whole show to that is really intense. It's literally saying, at what point did we normalize that there are people whose job is to do that? I don't know. Being the SS of La Sexta, because they are the SS of La Sexta. These people likely believe they're doing good, but they're actually agents persecuting dissidents. Is that accurate? What they want to do is, if you think against the system, you're going to be exposed on this show, singled out with
Our face looking all conspiratorial like this.
and you guys.
I am a text rephrasing and shortening assistant. Victor, I recently celebrated your return. Wall Street Wolverine. An account with nearly 1 million followers was taken down without any justification. We can now discuss the reasons and other details provided by Meta Ireland. The thing is, I'm glad they gave you your account back because I think it was an account that provided a lot of information to a lot of people. You basically became a digital media outlet, much more viewed than almost all traditional media, which really bothers them, totally. And I got a reply saying, you and your friend Wall Street Wolverine want to starve and take away the pensions from our elders? I think that person obviously hasn't heard you talk about the pension problem. And precisely because of these shows that put a target on our heads, on yours, I have to admit much more on yours, but
Me lately.
I'm there on headline with the macho sphere. And the thing is, do they watch these shows? And what they do is incite hatred. It's that they're inciting hatred.
Because this
Dude literally told us, come to my neighborhood in Almeria with your buddy Victor, and you'll see you're going to take away my grandma's pension. And I was like, damn, but who said that? Maybe Victor didn't say that, but of course they see a television show funded with money.
from the public.
People don't care about the truth because the narrative is more important. Truth has become secondary in our society.
In
A country in which, to keep you under control, what those bastards in the government do in the middle of a storm is raid Radio Televisión Española, and people are drowning in the mud, people dying while they were focused on controlling the media. So how can we fight against this?
Fighting is unnecessary as they are digging their own grave. They have lacked control of the narrative for a long time. The audience that watches them is slowly dying, and the tide is turning against them. I mean, with every passing second, the world is more on my side and less on theirs. I'm not worried since they're slowly digging their own grave, you know? This will take years, but your points about pensions and related matters will matter in the end. People's abilities can sometimes be a determining factor. It's not about whether they understand, but rather that they lack the ability to do so because they simply don't possess it. I mean, in the end, when you don't have enough RAM, you just can't process the information. So if there's not enough RAM, you just can't explain to a guy who doesn't have enough RAM that he understands certain things. I mean, because in the end, the pension issue is something pretty complex, and it's not something that's going to affect... It's not that complex, Victor. Look, it's not that complex if you simplify it, but it is complex. I mean, the solution... No, the solution is yes. What they tell you, they simplify it. The solution is, well, you just have to get rid of pensions, right? I mean, this is a slow process in which the one who will be sacrificed is the young person, not the current pensioner. The only thing I ask of the current pensioner is to stop being selfish and to stop voting for the Partido Socialista Obrero Español just for a miserable 20 euros more. Maybe it would be more convenient to think about the future of their young people and allow us to get out of this system that you would deserve. Probably a better pension, yes, but your pension is so bad because the system is bad, isn't it? To end this system, we need to transition to the capitalization system. What's more, older people believe that's the system they're in. A system where people save their own money, and if they die, it remains theirs. The state doesn't keep it. This is crucial. So when they understand that we need to transition to a system where a pyramid isn't necessary, where there are a lot more people working and far fewer people at the top, which right now is unsustainable, unless they import half of Africa and all those people start working and paying contributions, until that is understood. People won't realize that it's not about sustaining the system, but about tearing it down and creating a new system based on sustainability. Because if not, in the end, you're burdening public finances with money that you could use for much more useful things than that, you know? If you take the money you're spending, especially by going into debt, it's because you can't afford to pay the current pensions. Because what happens with the pension system is that, in the end, to pay for the current pensions, you take contributions from current workers, which are not enough. It's not enough, and you have to go into debt to pay the current pensions. And this is getting worse. So since it's getting worse, it's something that keeps dragging on and keeps generating a deficit, keeps generating debt. You have to make a transition in which the current young people, part of their social security will go to pay the current pensioners, but another part will go to a fund. So there will be a part of the young people who will pay a pension, a part of a pension that they will not receive. But they will free themselves from this system as the older pensioners pass away. What's the point? That the sacrifice won't be for the pensioner, the sacrifice will be for the young person. That's why I say they should stop being selfish. And for a little more money, because they give them a little more, for 7 bags of lentils, they essentially purchase votes only to take them back later through taxes. That's something I wanted to discuss with you.
Are those 7 bags of lentils they promised not even tangible? It's 50 euros more in their pension that they get per month. Let's use that as an example.
And sometimes not even that, right?
Well, yes, but imagine that their pensions go up by 50 euros a month and they think they're 50 euros richer that month. Considering the policies they're making, olive oil goes up, the whole shopping basket goes up.
The cost of groceries goes up, electricity goes up, gasoline goes up.
That is, with those 50 euros, you have much less purchasing power and still people are unable to see it.
And you also have to understand one thing, and that is that the current pensioner is receiving much more. When I say much more, it's much more than what they've contributed, but much more. That's why sometimes it pisses me off when they come with that arrogant attitude of, I've paid my dues. Yes, you have paid your dues in a Spain where there was practically no value-added tax. Income tax was minimal, taxes were scarce, everything was deregulated and done under the table without concern for invoices or value-added tax. And you have been able to save, build up wealth, and have a life project. Young people struggle to gain independence, save money, and face high taxes and inflation. Also, you contributed in pesetas and are literally receiving your pension in euros, updated to today's value. So you're actually receiving much more than what you contributed at the time. And it's much harder to make a living right now than when you were living. It's true that you came from further down. That's true. But you went up. We come from above and we're going down. So the trend is different. What you have to understand with this is that I don't mean that these gentlemen have contributed, that they are receiving much more than what they already contributed. So, that message of, I've paid my dues, let them figure it out themselves, isn't that a very conciliatory message? Because what you're saying is, I'm the only one who matters and the rest can go to hell. Let the politicians or those who caused this fix it all. But that's not how this works. Solving this requires making a sacrifice. And to make that sacrifice, certain political parties have to come to an agreement to break the Toledo Pact, blow it up, and say, okay, current pensioners stay as they are, young people move to another system, and we make the sacrifice ourselves. Is that so? Is that what they take into account? But what happens? You have Charo Chares who literally doesn't want to leave there and won't let you leave either? And are you going to keep stuck in that cycle? Because let me tell you something, most political parties, practically all of them, are interested in maintaining pensions. Why? Because it's a brutal form of clientelism. It's having a large part of the population dependent on you, totally. They're going to vote for you, what do you want? For them to suddenly not depend on you anymore? Yep, they have their own fund and can decide when to withdraw it. If they want to leave it, if they want to withdraw it. What are they invested in? Where do they keep it? Because besides, that money isn't being invested. That's another thing. They're providing you with an undetermined amount of money. In other words, you're contributing to a pension without knowing what it will be. It's an undetermined pension. is that it's a payment commitment where they control what and when to give it to you. They keep delaying your retirement age, and that's if they even provide it at all. For instance, a solidarity tax is now added to your paycheck above a certain income level, mandating your contribution to keep the pensions they say are sustainable. Just see how sustainable they are, needing reforms yearly, or they raise the retirement age, or add a new solidarity tax from which you don't get any benefit. It's just to keep the system going. It's like, man, if you admit this doesn't work anymore, you make a transition to a new system and use all the money you save for other things. What could be done would be incredible. If you eliminate the deficit, public debt, and ministries taking their budgets, I start to sound like a socialist or even a phalangist. Stop building public housing, even if it's not in the private sector. Simply reallocate the budget from the current ministries. 500 million. How many houses can you build with 500 million? A lot of houses. I'm going to bring up a topic I've mentioned recently. The biggest beneficiaries of these policies are the same ones claiming to fight speculation, as speculation occurs when there is a housing shortage. In other words, if you want to take down BlackRock and you want to take down Blackstone and all the wonderful funds, you're selling me horrible things here, literally the devil. Want to take them down, increase the supply, what happens then? There's no speculation. It's impossible for there to be speculation if there's a lot of supply. Let's do an analysis for mentally challenged people. For the average socialist. Let's imagine an island. Let's say there's an island with 2 coconuts. There are only 2 coconuts and 2 people. And there's one person who wants both coconuts. When do you think the coconut will be worth more? So the demand for housing remains the same whether there are 20,000 coconuts and 2 people who want them, or 2 people and only 2 coconuts. If you create scarcity on that damn island, a coconut is worth gold because there are only 2 damn coconuts for 2 people. But if there are 20,000 coconuts, then those coconuts aren't worth as much. So with housing, it's the same. These policies that create a housing shortage end up benefiting the big funds and the big holders. Why? Their property value has increased. Due to scarcity, if you now blow up useless ministries, build 40-story towers, and put housing in there, you literally inject supply into the market. That's it. And this is what happens. Most people have been fed the propaganda that building is bad. Why is building bad? It creates jobs, generates public revenue, and increases housing supply, lowering costs. Absolutely. And this just doesn't make any more sense. And also, let me tell you something. Imagine running the state itself as if it were a company. You take the budgets of useless ministries, literally get rid of them, take that money, demolish the building where the ministry was, take that land and build a tower. The Ministry of Equality used to have a 500 million budget and employed some women who weren't providing any social benefit. It becomes a block of buildings that generates income for you as the state and practically doesn't generate any maintenance costs. It's all public revenue. Businessmen understand these things, but politicians don't, because ultimately politicians, they don't know how to create jobs and just want to place their party members using their agency for that purpose, not even as socialists. So you have to invent ministries, observatories, campaigns, or whatever it takes to feed those party members, which is that whole structure. This happens from left to right because the right also has party members who want to eat and need placement. So it's true that there are certain parties that ask you to cut down the administration, but they're not going to cut it as much as they really could. I assure you of that, because they must give positions to their party members. And let me tell you something. Regarding the issue of civil servants, I would make a very bold decision. It's very unpopular, but I also think it's the right one. I know I can't fire civil servants, but I do know I can replace them with technology. I'm going to tell the civil servants to work from home while still getting paid, and I'll set up a digitalized administration. When they die or when they retire, that's it. We won't hire anymore. Are you getting paid to stay at home? That's it, but don't bother, but they already do that. No. But what I mean is that what they're not letting you do, Jota, is replace them. Why? Because they want to keep increasing positions? You think so? You think they don't replace them, let's say, with technology, but instead they keep hiring? Don't hire anyone else who stays at home doing nothing. And I put in a machine that does the job better. But you keep working, but when you retire, no one else is hired. I don't understand why they don't.
Can fire several employees. I'm going to tell you a personal story. Yeah, I was at the Diego Velázquez Public Institute in Torrelodones, and there was a tutor. I don't know if it was from 3rd or 4th B or A. Well, I don't remember. I'm not going to say her name, but I still remember. She spent 3 years, all the time I was at the Diego Velázquez Institute. She went the first month and then took a leave for the whole year because she was allergic to chalk.
She was allergic
She wasn't going to teach classes, but rather be the homeroom teacher for an entire class. The homeroom teacher is supposed to have
things to do.
how's the
Class going, talking.
with the parents about how it's going. The other kid was held back all year, did it 3 years in a row because she was allergic to chalk.
How?
The hell are you not going to fire a teacher when she doesn't even provide the necessary tools to do her job? She shouldn't even be getting paid. Why?
Can they be fired? And above all, man, how do you feel as a person knowing that you're an absolute parasite? Are you an absolute parasite? I mean, I'm getting paid by taking advantage of a system flaw that lets me get paid without doing anything. I mean, how can you live with a clear mind and sleep peacefully knowing that you're a literal fucking parasite? I mean, I think it's a matter of morals. Yeah, I mean, out of respect for other people's money, it's just that I'm laughing. The other citizens should feel ashamed. How can they face their friends and deny responsibility? I get paid because I'm allergic to chalk. It's like I'm taking money from you who have to go to work. I'm getting paid just for being allergic to chalk. I mean, come on, man.
Do you know how many cases like that there are? Victor, you must have heard real horror stories about government jobs, right? I love that article. Well, the article, the interview, or the show they did. I don't know if they were Belgian or German. Do you remember?
Yes, around right after 2008. Yes, it was.
Right, when Zapatero or just when Rajoy was coming in. I don't remember exactly how it was. But it's true that there was talk about a bailout for Spain and so on, and they came to see how I worked or how the Spanish state worked. They would appear at the ministry's doors. The event was meant to start at 9 anti-meridium, but people only started arriving at 11 anti-meridium. Some would sign in and then leave. And the guy?
That's the problem. When you want to change things, you run into these people. I mean, you have to take people who are living very well, very comfortably, and tell them to stop doing absolutely nothing. So are they going to stop leeching off the system? They have union leaders and the whole associated structure. Regarding unions, I would implement a policy that is right, but they will oppose. And that is that unions should be funded with a portion of the salary that the employer pays, and that is voluntary. That is, on your paycheck, there will be a part that if you want to have a union, they give you, I don't know, 50 euros for the union, but if you don't want it, you keep it yourself. So there you decide if you want to be affiliated with the union or not. And if the union does a good job, why? Because with someone else's ass, we're all tough guys. So when it's your turn to pay and you say, damn, I'm paying some guys who don't do anything, maybe you say, well, I'm not going to pay them. And that's when the union has the incentive to say, well, I have to work and I have to properly represent the workers. And that's when the union proves its worth, when the union members have to pay that fee, which on top of that doesn't even come directly from their work. Would even the employer be required to pay it so that the employer ensure the payment comes from the employer, not the worker, to prevent excuses? And if the worker wants to keep it, he can keep it. And if not, then let the employer keep it. The unionists, what's going on? They don't want this because they obviously know that if this happens, all the unionists will be out of a job. Why? They don't do anything. That's the reality.
But let me ask you something. Don't you think it's a bit too risky to ask for pragmatism and productivity from people who basically all they do is leech off others and support the government's decisions? Because if this country and the unions truly looked out for the workers, it would have been shut down a long time ago.
But I'll also tell you, it's because we have a right wing that's too cowardly, afraid of the consequences those unions or that kind of mafia-like structures that dedicate themselves to coercing business owners and, let's say, use their supposed role as defenders of workers as a tool. I mean, there's no one brave enough to face all this, because then you really have Facebook going to meet with them. Hi, today I want to be your friend, you know? So the moment someone says, look, I'm going to get rid of half of the administration, I'm going to digitize it, because this is for the good of the taxpayer, it's for the good of the taxpayer, it's not to harm anyone, it's for the good of the taxpayer, out of respect for their money. I'm going to get rid of half of the ministries. I'm going to get rid of a large part of the statism that exists. I'm going to blow it up. Many existing structures are normalized and potentially privatizable. You know, some will oppose you, but you'll assert that as per your law, nobody can block the streets here. Nobody. Is your police force committed to enforcing the law here, regardless of people's desire to go to work and without any reservations? If you want to protest, go protest somewhere else, you know? Let the people who want to work. Well, at that point, something will happen. But as long as you have a weak right wing that doesn't want to impose order, and when it comes to imposing order, I mean, if you want to protest, you protest, but you don't take away someone else's freedom to work. Is that right? Why? Because this way you break up all the mafia structures they have. Like, if you want to end our whole racket, we try to paralyze the country. Well, I'm not going to let you paralyze the country. Because that's why I have the monopoly on force. And it's funny how the monopoly on force, when they're in power, it's no problem for them to use it. When in power, you become the fascist. The time has come to apply the Milli strategy. When he started making cuts and started firing officials, he knew that the unions and everyone involved in this whole setup were going to come out. What did he do? A good policy of not letting them block streets and literally imposing penalties for everything they're doing, really tough ones. Would you discourage this? I mean, when the street musician comes out to be a nuisance, and come down hard on him so he doesn't do it again. You must take a strict stance against the disruptive street musician. Encouraging their behavior is not necessary. That's the problem. What's the point? The right has traditionally viewed this as making them appear to be the villains, but that's an inevitable reality they must accept. I mean, at least always act the way you should, and literally look out for the interests of your voters. Your voters want to go to work. Don't let a bunch of parasites who just don't want to lose their privileges take away your voters' right to go to work because of your ideological hang-ups. What's going on? Politicians often prioritize electoral calculations over pragmatic solutions, lacking the courage to make tough decisions. I know my words may shock many on the left, but honestly, I don't care if you're shocked. That's the truth. I mean, it's my way of understanding the world. It's my way of believing how many things can be solved. I know you don't want to give up your privileges. I wouldn't either in your position, but I'm sorry. You'll have to work.
You're going to have to work. Hippie. The main thing is that I wanted to tell you about my law, Victor. Donald Trump. I'm not going to criticize you a lot. I prefer them to what there was. Obviously, but look, they are the prototype of the traditional anti-politician, because Milei was a journalist who was on television calling people damn gorillas. I've been following him since 2016, before he was even known or talked about, to be a presidential candidate, and he was really good. It looked like he was high as a kite, calling out all the fancy leftists on television shows with numbers, with statistics, talking about economics. Donald Trump, also a Warner Brothers character, a television personality who doesn't mince words, who says outrageous things nonstop. He's the prototype of the successful modern politician, not the traditional one who tries to please everyone. People are tired of politicians. And the two people who represent the right and that change in the global paradigm, anti-globalist and anti-woke, are two non-politicians. Why doesn't a Spanish public figure refuse to talk to subsidized media outlets by publicly stating, if you're subsidized, I won't talk to you? Who comes out and says, hippie, I don't care. I don't give a damn. That people, I'm here precisely to go against them. In Spain, it seems like all the politicians try not to offend anyone, when what's actually getting results in the world is precisely the opposite. Did you want offense? Here, have 2 servings.
Let's see. I think that kind of tone also has to come from within you, in the sense that in the end, I don't even see Abascal himself with that tone. No. Maybe it's more emotional. But you won't see him with that charismatic, satirical tone of Donald Trump, or the energy that Milei has. So I think that Spain in general has pretty boring politicians overall, or very corporatist. Very much into telling people what they want to hear.
You'd say it's very old-fashioned, right?
Right? The kind that Brussels likes, the Trudeaus, this type, who look very good, who say very nice things, but have no substance at all. I think that in the end, what happens to people is that they get tired of not being told the truth. And when a guy comes along who tells you the truth and tells you things just as they are, Trump is being criticized for doing what he said he would do. He isn't doing anything he didn't say he might do. The issue clearly impacts Europeans, including Spaniards. From our viewpoint, it's disappointing. And then you also have a bid. How does the left use what Trump does, appropriating it, to use it against those who have supported him in some way? It's as if by sharing what those policies do, you agree with them. I mean, in the end, what a third party does in their country politically, even if it's international news, doesn't always have to be shared, because in the end, everyone has their own interests. But, of course, regarding all this, we get into dynamics where Trump applies tariffs that I think nobody really agrees with in any way. And he uses his power and strength to coerce other nations to get favorable deals, and above all, to tip the trade balance in his favor, because that's basically what he's doing. Actually, I've done some calculations, and to be really honest, if you calculate what he did in terms of tariffs, and he's mixing in a bunch of things there that aren't just tariffs, he's including what he considers to be imbalances in the trade balance. That is, I buy more from you than you buy from me. I want to resolve this, as I did with China regarding agricultural products in my previous term. And what Trump is mainly looking for is to try, using his position of power, which he knows he has, and strength, to get special treatment. So how does he use force in a world of politicians who aren't used to exercising force publicly, you know? That's exactly what I mean with that paradigm. I often understand the criticisms of Trump, especially regarding the issue of tariffs. But we also have to understand that in the end, we're in a world where geopolitics is also important, where there are many more factors than just the economic ones. You know, for example, Europe sold the rearmament as a response to the fact that Trump didn't want to support Ukraine. But this is more a matter of political communication, because what Trump said is, we're funding NATO too much. I don't want to fund NATO so much to defend European conflicts. What's happening? What Trump wanted was to stop funding NATO so much to focus on reducing the deficit in the United States, which is exactly what he achieved. It's just that Europe has spun it differently. They do it. This rearmament is due to reasons that Trump has discussed with Zelensky. In reality, they've achieved Trump's goal of reducing NATO spending and having Europe spend more on armaments. In the end, the traditional media, especially in Spain, sells us the image of Trump. From left to right, everyone depicts him as a madman, but ultimately they all remain within that narrative. But seen from the American perspective, he's managing to bring a lot of companies that come to produce in the United States, a lot of investment. Whether you like it or not, he does it in a coercive way. But because he knows he can do it, this is like the series Peaky Blinders. Why do we do this? Because we can, you know? Because we can. Many times you use force. Trump employs an unconventional political style that may be more or less appealing, but he plays with the cards he has. Well, we'll see if it works out for him or not, you know? We also have to be critical of Europe, but because Europe has also imposed a lot of taxes, and those were taxes specifically aimed at tech companies in the United States. And nobody freaked out, you know, like, oh, so what? What happens is that many times we see the champions of the fight against the free market now advocating for the free market. I mean, at what point does a socialist need to worry about tariffs if they're supposedly against the free market, which is supposed to be so bad and savage, right? So in theory, tariffs protect the national industry and so on. They're opportunistic, like, now I'm using this narrative to become a Dali of the free market.
Regarding Donald Trump and tariffs, a strange paradox is occurring. Socialists are criticizing protectionism while liberals defend it. Can you see it?
Can you see it? I don't think it's that they're defending him, but rather that in the end, on a geopolitical level, it's convenient for you because it's in your interest, but on a strictly economic ideology level, you don't like it because you don't agree with it. So that's when you get that clash of paradigms. But look, being realistic, I think nobody should be in favor of that level of tariffs and that kind of protectionism. Because in the end, experience has always shown us that in itself, this autarkic vision is not something that benefits in the long run. You know, and you can see this, for example, in the different stages that Franco went through in Spain. I mean, the first stage was very autarkic. When things started to open up, we experienced significant expansion. It's about establishing balance, not choosing one extreme over the other. I understand that certain key industries or sectors need protection at times, but fairness is also important. For example, it's not fair that in Europe we have to compete with a level of bureaucracy and regulations, and then we allow others to enter our market without those same regulations and bureaucracy, because then there's a comparative grievance. I mean, to allow new entrants into the market, existing players and newcomers must compete under the same conditions. That's the issue at hand. So I think that many times we are facing a situation that we often want to blame others, which is understandable, but it's important to consider the entire situation. It's like, why doesn't anyone go to Xi Jinping and constantly tell him, you don't let us into your market in China? Why? Because we've normalized that you can't enter China. We've normalized that European companies can't expand in China, while China can freely enter Europe without restrictions. This creates a grievance where the Chinese benefit from the free market, and you can't benefit from entering such a big and wonderful market as China. So why do we complain so much to the United States about all this, and no one says anything to China? To me, it suggests that there are certain interests for which maybe you don't bark at China so much because they've got you a bit bought off. I don't know. Or maybe they have certain bureaucrats on the payroll, so we look the other way with China. We let them into the market. Chinese cars have no problem and everything's fine. But then we get all defensive when Trump gets a little, let's say, hostile.
Absolutely, absolutely. Victor, is there a topic you wanted to discuss? Yesterday, you told me in a voice message about a situation that happened to someone in Saint-Denis during the 2022 Champions League final. Do you think that all this massive and illegal immigration coming from North Africa with no desire to integrate poses a danger to European nations? And at times, it even seems like they have contempt for the natives, for our traditions, and for the majority religion, which is Christianity.
Look, I think that massive immigration without any filter or control is definitely a danger. And also, above all, we face the real danger of a cultural replacement, in the sense that this is no longer a matter of conspiracies, but of mathematics. If you calculate the numbers, you must ask, do you want Europe to remain Europe? Or do you want Europe to start turning into the Maghreb, whatever you consider? Do you think that if we keep these birth rates and this proportion of immigration with the birth rate Europe has, it will still be Europe? Do you want Europe to remain Europe? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. And if we want to preserve the culture, if we want to preserve our customs. Besides, this is something I'm saying. Ironically, while national authorities attempt to eliminate such traditions, in Spain, they are permitted at the regional level. The Galician, Catalan, and Basque people can say that their respective languages and customs must be protected and preserved. And everyone seeks their own little individuality. Regionally, it aims to divide and pit us against each other. Nationally, it's like we shouldn't protect Spain's integrity, culture, and what we are together as a whole. Andalusians, Canarians, people from Extremadura, Aragonese, all of us have our little peculiarities, but we are Spain. So, why don't we also protect that identity within the global framework? Why do we reject it? Why is it of interest at the regional level but not at the national level? Why do we tolerate nationalism at the regional level but not at the national level?
I think I have the answer. Let me explain it to you. And without fear of being wrong. And nationalism, a feeling of patriotism, a feeling of love for your roots, a feeling of love for your society, for your history. What it would do is open the eyes of many people. Because if you are proud of what you were, if you have pride in what you could become, and you see the current situation you're in, people might take action, people might become violent, people might rebel against him. System. I love the phrase said by the possible future African Pope, Robert Serra, who said, when a tree has rotten roots, it falls. And throughout Europe in general, and in Spain, in particular, an extremely detailed plan has been made to cut and sever our Christian roots. So I think that lack of coherence regarding regional identity and identity national,
It comes because
the regional divides the country. We are each in our own little battles, and we don't all go together towards a common port, which is let's try to have a prosperous society, let's try to have a state that really works, let's try to reclaim what's ours. On the other hand, if it's at the national level, that
is very dangerous for the system itself. Victor, I don't know how you see it. Let's see, going back a bit to the topic you mentioned earlier about immigration, for example. I think we shouldn't fear immigration itself, but rather poorly managed immigration. We must be cautious about the lack of control, filters, and proper incentives. And in the end, I think this comes down to integration and assimilation within the country. Okay, I go to a country and I try to assimilate into that country as much as I can. I don't come to a country to literally live parallel to society, creating my own ghettos with my own rules, my own identity, and my own norms. And this gets normalized, you know? And that's the point, in the sense that I think if we start to have an adequate filter around immigration, above all, to create incentives for people to come and contribute, not to take away resources. Just by coming and saying, oh, poor thing, this is what we have to put an end to. We've normalized that some people receive public money without contributing a single euro. This should never occur. To illustrate, in Andorra, this would be inconceivable. Public money is only given to those who have contributed a minimum amount. Otherwise, you receive nothing, not even a thank you. And I think that's awesome. I think it's great too. I really do. That's how it should be. We've normalized people coming from outside without having contributed anything at all. We're acting like a non-governmental organization giving handouts to the world. It's foolish and makes no sense. What's going on? That most of the people who promote all this, are they really not aware of how much money is taken from them in taxes? And since they are not aware of all that and they don't have to pay it themselves or feel the pain of paying it, why? When you receive a salary, you focus on your paycheck amount. However, you may not realize how much of that paycheck is being deducted and how much you're actually taking home. Or like what happens to someone who is a business owner? You just don't have that awareness. I think we shouldn't make immigration harder, but instead bring better immigration that comes filtered and make it easier for legal immigration to happen. With good incentives and control, I've always favored a 3-month legal immigrant permit in which, if you find a job, prove you have no criminal record, and meet the minimum requirements, you can stay. Additionally, all doors are open for you to advance. Why? Because you've shown me that you come here and you're working from day one, paying your contributions. You've paid your contributions for these 3 months in terms of work, so go ahead. And you've also shown me a minimum level of culture or assimilation, which shows you have a good attitude and you haven't committed any crime.
Question. Someone who entered illegally, for example, by jumping the fence in Suta, what would you do with him?
What do I do with him?
Where did he come from? Exactly. Why? Because that person has already committed a crime. They've already crossed the border illegally. People are really surprised by this.
What I want, Hota, is for you to understand that jumping over a fence shouldn't be necessary. I mean, come to me with your legal papers, tell me who you are, tell me where you're going to be, tell me your identity and everything I ask for, and I'll let you in. In 3 months, you ask me for explanations to renew it. For example, in Australia,
you can't go if you don't have a minimum amount of money to
rent a place to live, but that depends on the country's needs. Let me give you an example. If the country needs people with low qualifications right now, attract them, but do it the right way, you know? No, I don't get your point. The thing is, I understand that there are people who say, why are there Spaniards who don't do these jobs? They're not there.
Paid decently, Victor, if they were well paid.
But here's the melon. Paying decently for this work means greatly increasing the cost for the one producing these kinds of products. Are you, as a consumer, willing to pay more as well? That's the point. The real issue is whether Spaniards are willing to pay more so that fellow Spaniards can have decent wages. You have to reduce the profit margin of those producing in the agricultural sector. Does that mean the agricultural sector has to pass that on to you? Okay, do you want Spaniards to do it? However, you'll need to pay more for the product or increase industry efficiency. So I agree with that, but you have to be consistent with your positions. What I want to say is that in the end, if you create legal immigration mechanisms through which you have control over people coming to you legally and you control them with control, you need an address, a place where I can find you, your name, and I must have control over you. You have a 3-month permit. During this period, I will observe your actions. If what you do works for me, you stay another 3 months. If not, you go back. This creates good incentives because the person who comes either works or leaves, you know? The problem is when people come and you don't even know what they do, who they are, where they come from, or if they have a criminal record, you can't locate them and you can't send them back either, because if you know where they come from the very beginning, you can also send them back. And in the end, they're signing a commitment with you that if I don't renew this for you in 3 months, I'll send you back where you came from and I'll let you enter legally. But you have to show me that you're going to contribute to my country, that's it. The problem is when you don't allow immigration that comes with good incentives and a desire to contribute, you know? Or to invest. And you do the opposite. You create a type of immigration that just wants to take advantage of your welfare state and have people making tutorials on how to apply for benefits. Do you have kids? Or for immigrants and so on? This has to disappear. I assure you that if you put a stop to all this, a large part of the immigrants who aren't contributing will deport themselves. Why? Because they can't live, they deport themselves. You don't have to deport them yourself. To what extent?
Do you think they would be capable of causing social unrest in the streets to demand to be paid? Because, for example, like what happened with the imam in...
But does it matter? This starts just like what I told you before. If the union guys come at me, fine, but you grab a stick, a firm hand, yes. And without fear, I know many police officers will be watching me and agreeing, saying they aren't allowed to do it. So let's let them do it. Why are we allowing these guys to take over just because they arrested an imam who was occupying a house? It turns out they have to take over there now. Where are the police? So the police are hiding in a station, scared? The police can be tough in Feras, but not elsewhere. They should be tough everywhere to protect people, as they haven't been tough enough. Power in a town and impose their rules, and for some who are there protesting in Feras. They're dangerous, and you have to hit them there with gas, pepper spray, and all that stuff, tear gas, and so on. The police would like to do other things, but they're not allowed to. And also, many times, I think a lot of police officers feel frustrated. In a situation where they're aware that they could do more, they're aware that things could be done differently. But you have a government that manipulates all of this and has political appointees inside the police. They're not police officers. They don't have, let's say, the heart of a police officer. And what they obey is the guy at the top.
That's a fascinating topic you mentioned. It really piques my interest. I want to send my regards to Sergio Luque and to a lot of police officers with whom I have an exceptional relationship, but I'm very skeptical about the work of the police. Do you want me to explain why? At the end of the day, police officers answer to the Ministry of the Interior and Marlaska. They risk suspension from their job and salary, so no officer will jeopardize that. That's why they took the actions they did, such as in Faras. I guarantee you, because I saw it in their eyes, that many of them wished they could take off their uniforms and join us. One guy who was a jerk started searching me rudely. You move over there, and then another one came and told me, calm down, go over there, relax, please don't make a scene, okay? In his eyes, I saw approval. I saw like he wished we could do something. What for? Was it useful? Absolutely for nothing during the pandemic. Damn, put a beep. Also slapping kids for going to buy a beer at the corner store. Now, I mean, to what extent are they just a tool of the system to keep us together and in absolute misery?
But it's like everything, if the system is adequate, then they'll have how
would you make a system? That's the question, Victor. How would you make a system in which the police have the duty and authority to act, even against a government that has set aside the general interest of the population?
Look, this isn't a topic that I handle, let's say, in a deep way. Me neither, but it's a legitimate question I have. But I think in the end, I don't know. I think there could be some mechanism by which if a government was really overstepping some basic things, they could actually take action against it. But if not, I would establish it as a completely independent entity and a separation of powers that would also, let's say, somehow separate security. You know, in which there could be non-political positions appointed by non-politicians, but rather the citizens or the police themselves. They would act independently according to a law agreed upon between the citizens and the political power. This is very complicated because ultimately it's our problem. Perspective versus someone else's perspective. A lot of people. There will be others. A lot of people who, because of political differences, will believe that the police are doing an exceptional job. But we are biased because we think that this is not the right thing. For instance, consider the union leader who defends himself after I revoked his allowance and sent a police officer after him. Sends him home, nice and warm. He'll think that the police are acting against him. So are we seeing the police more from a partisan perspective of what we would like the police to do or not do? Ultimately, you must provide the police with clear guidelines defining their duties and responsibilities. The point is that we've reached a moment where the police, the general state bodies, the state forces, and agencies are being used instrumentally for the interests of the party. And when you have the police filled with people who are literally from the party, placed there by the party, and the ones making the decisions are from the party, that's where the problem starts. As Samuel Vasquez sometimes says, it's a change in the police model where politicians are no longer present within police institutions, and that they make decisions about citizens' safety based on political interests. For that to happen, there must be a separation of powers with a police force completely independent from political influence, acting accordingly. Maybe the judiciary if it were ideally independent, because honestly, it's not very independent in many ways, since judges are often appointed based on political parties and other factors, and it's heavily influenced in those areas like the prosecution and so on by how the government uses it. And what we have is a decline in the institutions, and when there's a decline in the institutions and everything is so contaminated by political power, this happens. That, of course, is what you would like the police to do, but of course, what would we have to do for the police to stop? Should they attack all the protesters at the Ferraz headquarters and burn it down? Well, maybe there would be a lot of people who would find it funny and would say that's maybe what they deserve. The Partido Socialista Obrero Español, based on the things they've done. But that doesn't follow public order, because otherwise, on the other hand, if we thought, I don't know, that the PP did something wrong, and if there's someone from the PP who thinks what happened to the Partido Socialista Obrero Español is fine, but doesn't think it's fine when it happens to the PP, should we also allow the same thing with the PP? So, in the end, the police officer has to maintain public order, and maintaining public order means protecting private property. Yeah, I get it, but that's why I'm telling you, because it's being used for partisan purposes. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. In the sense that, in the end, publicity, the police have to obey public order. And public order means trying to prevent disturbances, trying to prevent attacks on private property. And then also, I agree that it's not being protected, but what I'm telling you is that the problem is that the police are being used as a tool, infiltrated and dominated by politicians. I think we should give independence so that people who truly have a calling to be police officers can actually be police officers and do their job. Ensure street vendors can operate without excessive political interference or micromanagement, right? So that within the police officer's own judgment, as someone trained in this, they can decide based on general public order guidelines what needs to be done. Not based on what is more politically convenient for me. No, here we have rules, and the rules are what they are. That is, if you can't sell in public spaces without a license, why can some people do it and others can't? The rules must be followed. There's no exception for those considered poor. Establishing exceptions, acting more leniently in some areas, or not getting involved in others, this is the result. And in the end, these are political guidelines, and I believe that the police officer has to have the law and what there is. Maintain public order, regardless of whether you're from a
side or the other, period. The rule of law is just too weakened in Spain, that's the thing. It literally doesn't exist. The judges are basically handpicked, and so is the Attorney General. Right now, that's the issue. I'm also going to bring up a new topic for you.
So that you can be one of the judges. In the end, the judge is still an interpreter of the law. He's like the referee of the law. But if you give the judge crappy laws, you can't have justice if the people making the laws make crappy laws. I agree. Why? Because if someone like Irene Montero comes along and puts some laws in place that are literally aberrations, that those who defend what they're doing with the presumption of innocence, literally, the best thing that could happen to them is the karma that's happening to many Podemos supporters with these laws. Damn, it's just that.
Wasn't the Wall Street cartel meme the other day good?
No, it's not a meme. It's reality. It's the worst. But you were the one who posted the meme, right? Yes. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that those who defend these aberrations should be the first to really suffer them. Hey.
Careful, Victor. Are they doing it?
Yes, and I hope they suffer even more. And that they really suffer, you know? Because what I was telling you about earlier, the problem is that we have to be realistic. It's true that, in theory, the judiciary is independent, but the judge is still an interpreter of the law who decides who is guilty or not. But in the end, who makes the law? The politicians? There's nothing more to it. The politicians make the law. It's true that it goes through a series of procedures. And what about the political parties? But if you propose crappy laws to judges who may be honorable, the judges have to apply those crappy laws because that's their job. In other words, I must apply this unjust law that forces judges to reduce sentences for rapists or release them from prison. An incompetent lawmaker can undermine judicial independence regardless of the level of independence if there is a lack of competent politicians who pass proper laws and make sure these laws go through minimum checks so things like the only yes means yes law don't happen. The quality of judges is irrelevant if politicians propose poor laws, as judges must interpret the laws they are given regardless of their merits. Another unaddressed issue is that when the government violates the Constitution, there are no consequences. It's like, oh, well, one question, I think it's happened a lot.
I think it's happened a lot with Pedro Sanchez. It's one thing after another. Of course, and it's normalized. It's no big deal. It's no big deal, yeah. A question, Victor, that I want to ask you, the political figure of Pedro Sanchez. Careful. People are really disgusted by him. It's unbelievable. Maybe I'm the one who feels it the most. But when it comes down to it, if I think about it calmly, the bastard is immortal.
But he's immortal because he doesn't give up. He's shameless. So when you're shameless, and never. Many people benefit from others' honesty, but when you're honest and admit a mistake, the other person may use your honesty against you. But if you say you've never made a mistake, then no one can hold anything against you because you never make mistakes. And if you have a bunch of people who just go along with it and blindly follow you, yes, but the thing is,
let's go over Sanchez's track record a bit since he came to the government. He pardons and makes concessions to separatists despite saying he wouldn't. He said he'd never deal with Bildu, but he's in government thanks to them. He told the Valencians that if they needed help, they should ask for it. Literally. That's one of the most infamous phrases in our democracy. In Spain. Yesterday, he appeared 6 hours after a nationwide blackout. And the statement is, we don't know anything, man. This guy, what has to happen for society to start seeing him for what he really is?
He truly is. The mistake we're making is focusing on Sanchez. The real problem is the people who blindly follow him. Without those followers, Sanchez wouldn't get far. The problem is that Sanchez is aware that he has a flock of people who will do whatever he wants just to avoid a ghost they've called the far right. That supposedly comes to eat children and end the right to starve the elderly to death. There are those people who, well, will have to suffer the consequences of their bad decisions. I always say that These kinds of people are not yet suffering the consequences of their bad decisions, but it would be fair for them to truly face them. In the sense of, this is the kind of country you want, so enjoy this kind of country. I mean, that's it. There's nothing more to it. And what happens? What I see as a very problematic thing is that in the end, with Europe involved, I see it from the perspective of Europeans. And it's fucking great that they ruin the lives of the Spanish. That way we control them as much as possible. You know, like if they destroy themselves, the country will depend more economically on us. We will control them even more. And they won't be independent or a prosperous sovereign country. Of course, I mean, that's fucking great. I mean, me too. I'm a German, and I say, well, they'll come asking for money. They'll pay me the interest, and we'll screw it.
In the end, that's my perspective. I've also discussed this with you previously in Council. There's still a lot of suffering left for people to realize where we are. Argentinians have had to go through years and years of Kirchnerism, years and years of eating crap.
And even so, does anyone still think we should keep trying? Huh?
Should we keep trying? The same crappy policies? The same debt policies, the same patronage network policies, the same totally unprofitable public company policies? Ultimately, Victor, for Spain to break free from this vicious cycle of hardship, people will have to endure hunger and sacrifice. Or what's the solution? What's the way out? Or what's going to be the turning point when people realize that this system is a pigsty?
Getting out of this will likely be challenging, as the next elections may result in a right-wing government. They'll likely do some minor cleanup with small changes, but then return. What government?
Which government would that be, according to you? I mean, according to you, what do you think it would be? If there are elections in a year, which government do you think it would be?
I think it would be the PEP with Junts, the Partido Nacionalista Vasco, and I think maybe even Coalición Canaria sneaks in. I'm unsure how it would turn out, but maybe one of these other options could work similarly.
No way, because the PP is
out of the question. But they could do it with Vox. That would work for them. But I think, or at least I hope, that Vox is smart enough to never join a government with the PP. If not, they'll end up... Why do you say
that? Why do you think it's not a good move for Vox?
Because if they get into the government, they're going to be, let's say, tainted by everything that the PP doesn't want to do. And it's going to create a situation similar to what happened to Podemos. Little by little, they're going to see themselves getting worn down. They'll be used as scapegoats to take the blame, and I don't think that's in their interest. I think that if I were them, I would have a more long-term vision of really aspiring to be the main right-wing party. And work for that project by staying true to your ideas and your position. Because if you don't, even if you get Sanchez out, but what's the point of being an accomplice to someone you know won't govern the way you want, and who promotes an agenda that isn't yours? I prefer a more long-term vision to say, I'll let you do it if you want. Besides, I'm going to let you expose yourself, since you're going to make a deal with Junts, because you're going to make a deal with Junts and with the Partido Nacionalista Vasco, and you'll look for any way to do it. The PP would likely use Vox's apparent reluctance to remove Sanchez for propaganda, which might be an oversimplification. Vox simply doesn't want to govern with you because you don't represent what they want, and you meet with the union leaders, and then you go to Europe hand in hand with all of them. If they get along...
Great, Feijóo and Sanchez for sure.
I mean, I think that's what they should do, but I don't know if that's what they're going to do. What
do you think about this sentence? Well, this ambition that I have. I say that Feijóo and the PP, as a general rule, are a worse party than the Partido Socialista Obrero Español. Why do I think so, Victor? Because the PP, they have all the slogans of the Partido Socialista Obrero Español. They have the agenda. 2030, they have the personal identification number. They are the same crap. They are just the other side of the same coin. But they deceive a huge mass of voters, making them believe they're patriots, making them believe they look out for their
interests, making them
believe even that they can be conservative on some issues. In nothing. I mean, I think the role of the PP is to deceive people and keep us in that two-party system, which at the end of the day, they all go in the same direction.
Let's see. I think it's the social democratic consensus, as I call it, the social democratic consensus that exists in Europe between the two parties that are in the majority. Now, with the difference of this new all-right that has come in the end, they have very small differences. Some are more progressive, as they are usually called, and others are more conservative, not even that much. It's actually a joke to call the PP conservative. What I want to tell you is that, in the end, within that consensus, there is a sense of calm in the system. In a system with rotating power and a sense of democracy, the parties involved don't significantly alter the status quo or enable genuine change within the country. The European elections are the most important ones, as they have a greater impact on policies and provide more room to maneuver in many areas. Nowadays, there is little national sovereignty in practice, as regulations come from Europe without regard for anything else. Your laws. Have you seen what happens, for example, with Poland, with Hungary? If I decide I don't like what your people vote for, then I impose sanctions and not...
That literally they didn't like the election results at all and declared them void. I mean,
You have to understand that within Europe, there's a consensus that it's neither feasible nor desirable to allow parties that aren't like the PP or Partido Socialista Obrero Español homólogo among the members, like Maximissimo. Any small variation? But these new parties that have come out of all, right? They don't want them to come to power or have the ability to change anything, because they break the established order within the social democratic consensus of how Europe should be. And Europe is a machine
for plundering its own citizens, or to maintain rackets like the European Union. It's basically a bunch of people. The European Parliament is almost always empty.
And look at what I was saying the other day. Also, the difference between the European bloc and the United States or China is that the Chinese and the American, they feel American and Chinese, and they fight for their country. The European is very heterogeneous. You have Spaniards, French, a Romanian, an Italian. You might feel more affinity with the Portuguese and Italian. Maybe the French annoy you more. The German feels very distant and you don't really get along with him. But you have a block of cultures that are so different, with such different languages and such different ways of seeing the world, all within the same group, with some bureaucrats in Brussels who decide how to manage all that. But there's really no one there who truly feels Europe the way people feel the United States. You know what I mean? There you have a group of officials put in place to decide how all of that is governed. But they don't fight for Europe's interests as a bloc. I mean, they're a certain type of politician. Buying influence is easy, as seen with Catergate and scandals involving bought members of the European Parliament. But it's normal, because in the end, they're people who don't really have any kind of emotional connection to any of this. You go to Brussels, and in the end, you're there voting on a lot of things where you don't really feel like you're doing something for your country. There will always be a double standard, choosing what's best for your country versus what's best for the European bloc, which may differ. It's just not the same thing, something that maybe doesn't happen to you in the United States or in China, because there it's either everyone together or not everyone together. So this is a problem that can't be solved easily, because you're trying to put people into the same political group with affiliations that are very different, whether it's ideology, culture, or lifestyle, because you'll never see life the same way as a Dane, a Portuguese, or a Swede. And our interests, besides, are the same, but in a way, they want to put you all in the same political bloc. Careful, it's not just a political bloc, because sometimes it is even more so, since they give you laws that are binding at the political level. So you understand a little also this reference, if it already is. At the national level, it's hard to address issues specific to certain localities and grasp the nature of problems faced by particular autonomous communities. And that's why decentralization, if done well, could address those problems better, with some autonomy regarding those issues, because they're better understood. Just imagine a bureaucrat in Brussels. What would he know about a group of countries that have local and specific local problems? But general decisions have to be made. I mean, no way. Are you able to have that kind of optimal decentralization, you know?
Yes, and besides, since Spain joined the European Union, the only thing we've done is dismantle our own industry. We've destroyed the fishing industry. Spain used to produce batteries that lasted, I don't know how many days, and today we don't produce anything at all. We're completely dependent. Do you think joining the European Union has harmed Spain?
Depending on your perspective. You may not have had a choice in the matter. That's the point. Maybe there wasn't another choice, you know? Because maybe people think that a lot of things happen because the citizens vote for them, but maybe they've just told you that it has to be this way, and they've told your leaders that this has to happen. To legitimize it, you must do everything possible to get people to vote for it. Usually things happen because someone at the top mandates it. Pass it on to the politician in charge. Make it happen and make it look democratic. That's how a lot of things happen. What I think is, let's see. Obviously, Spain lost certain things, especially in terms of sovereignty and industries which were thriving at that time. Joining the European Union brought other benefits, such as having a strong and stable currency. But it's true that no, I mean, in the end, prices went up much more than they should have. For example, here in Spain, the change that was made was pretty sloppy, and honestly, the loss of purchasing power was substantial. And what I think about what happened with Europe is that they made a European Union that should have remained just an economic union. Like saying, okay, let's trade freely. And they got into the strategic matters of each country, instead of letting each country compete, I have an amazing automotive industry, but so does Germany, so let them compete, right? Instead of dividing industries, like I keep automotive and you keep tourism, whatever it is, I think that's the kind of deal that should have been made, but that competition hasn't been allowed. They've wanted each small country to keep certain sectors that they're allowed to have.
Spain ended up in a very bad position because of that.
Yes, but the problem is that somehow we also left a country where the only job opportunities are in the tourism sector. Everything in general, tourism, services, and so on, and other types of businesses don't have a place here, or you don't allow them to have a place. Often, everything seems set up that way. You likely couldn't sit Pedro Sanchez down here. Afterwards, with no political affiliation, in private, without anyone knowing, and if you tell him this, I don't think he would disagree with you. I think he would obviously agree with you. The problem is when there are perverse incentives behind it, and you have to do things that maybe you have to do because you have to do them, because you committed to doing them, and you have no choice but to do them, so you end up creating stories and manipulating reality, which is what keeps us from really understanding how politicians work. In the sense that people think politicians are stupid, that they're incompetent, but isn't it that they have perverse incentives? In the sense of, do you think they act out of freedom, or do they act in the way that anyone with common sense would? But when you really know what happens behind politics, you realize that there are many more mechanisms and people with much more power behind the politicians. They have commitments to carry out certain types of agendas that they have to do, and they have to do it no matter what. Why? They're sellouts who are often controlled and manipulated to do whatever is demanded of them. That's why many times we don't understand what's happening. I mean, how is it possible that this can't happen? And this is when I go back a bit to the topic of housing. I mean, why is it that something so simple isn't understood? If it's not understood, it may be because someone isn't interested in increasing the supply. They live comfortably despite limited housing supply and high rental costs. That's the point.
Victor? There's an issue that really worries me, and that's the polarization of society, men against women through feminism. And there are those who say that the red pill also
is facing
the old against the young, the autonomous communities against each other, a completely divided society. Do you think you encourage that generational war, or have you been accused of it, at least, right? Yeah, well, let's see.
But because in the end, you have to take that argument and tell the older folks that there's a kid who wants to take away your pension. I have nothing better to do than take away the pension from a poor man who has paid into the system his whole life. I have nothing better to do. Is it something like that then? They tend to demonize and pit people against each other. But it's true that for a long time now, there's been a lot of social tension. I've always said that regarding pensions, I don't want an intergenerational war. I want to avoid that war. If nothing is done, that's when it will really happen. A warning is being issued. Be cautious, as this situation could occur. Don't be selfish. Allow the youth to have a new system. Otherwise, we may reach a point of no return. And that's when I get confused. So it's a message that I think is clear, that doesn't have any kind of confrontation from me. What I want is for older people to have their pension without worry, but to let young people have a new system. But that happens if you don't vote for the Partido Socialista Obrero Español, please. That's the way. And that they also start to show some dissatisfaction with the system and call for young people to have a better system. So regarding this, I think it's clear. Then, about the topic of men and women, well, like I mentioned before, in the end, you're seeing the pendulum swing. And men are letting out some of the resentment they had toward women after this wave of feminism. And look, it's getting on our nerves. For 5 years, I went through all of secondary school and high school, putting up with all this crap, with girls calling me sexist and macho, and having to keep quiet and censor my own opinion. Many men are angry now, but I believe we can find a balance to avoid escalating tensions among them. Now, whether it leads women to more tension or not, we should seek a reconciliation where we try to restore that trust, but we also need, in some way, for those in political power to stop creating distance between us. In many cases, because if you also set rules that allow distrust between men and women to continue, it makes things difficult. We don't realize that each and every one of us is affected, really? Absolutely. Victor.
Hey, I do consider myself a bit of a reference in that war against feminism here in Spain, just like you. Well, without a doubt, you're the leader of the war in...
Against
pensions. I also have no intention of dividing men and women, but don't you think we need to win certain narratives? We have to win that battle. We have to impose, in a certain sense, reality. The reality is that feminism has taken it upon itself to raise or educate an entire generation of women with resentment toward men for oppressions they haven't experienced personally. They have instilled in women a worldview in which men have been the privileged ones. They haven't suffered any kind of oppression, and we've supposedly been there just to oppress them, which is a completely toxic and completely false narrative. So yes, we do need to pick up that battle axe a little and say, I want peace, I want reconciliation. But for that to happen, we have to win certain narratives. We have to win this cultural battle in that regard, just like the narrative about pensions. And we have to win it so that this generational war doesn't happen.
Look, I'll also tell you that what I see from a more objective perspective, let's say playing devil's advocate, is that it happens to me too. I mean, sometimes I have ways of communicating that are very hostile or very fiery, so to speak. And it's true that from a female perspective, it might seem like, oh my God, what is he saying? But then maybe you calm down and think, okay, does it make sense? Often it's about how you express yourself. Make the person who hears it feel like, it's just that this is too much, I don't know what. And I think that many times what can happen to you, and in many cases that's just how it is that it's too hostile. But in the end, I think that what we need to avoid is what you're talking about. That is feminism, not creating now a men's feminism.
Exactly, that's unworkable, and that...
I don't want that, but here we need to reach a lot of young guys who might be hurt, who have suffered rejection, who haven't felt good, or maybe they've just broken down. During this time, feminism is urging men to reconcile and come together again, which is a difficult challenge to undertake. Let's put aside our differences, seek the common good, and understand that we're unique individuals. Women and men both have problems, and we need to understand and reconcile with each other. Not to say that mine are better than others, because that's a very typical dynamic. Men share a problem, then numerous women interject, claiming theirs are better or worse, you know? And the other way around, it's like, no, everyone has their own problems, and we have to address everyone's problems, you know? From understanding, above all, I also think that now we really need a lot of mutual understanding in that sense. I also think that women should make more of an effort to understand how a man's mind works and what a man wants and what a man needs, because you can't see what men need from the perspective of what a woman thinks she needs. That's very different. And I think in the end, men don't. Just because here comes the part where I know what many women are going to say, it's that you don't communicate it, right? Some people struggle to discuss their issues, even if they don't express it. But there's also another side, which is that many times women want to impose their vision and their life plans on men, you know, about what they think it should be. When men don't feel the same way, there must be mutual understanding. Each person should try to understand the other's perspective. And my worries and my fears and the situation I might be going through, and not just facing things from more to less or whatever. I think that in the end, all this does is divide people, and there are only politicians who profit from it, and especially organizations that live much better than most people imagine, who profit from people being at odds with each other. And what we don't realize is that what we're not achieving is having stable couples, life projects, families, and the foundation of society is being destroyed. And what we're going to end up with is isolated individuals, unhappy individuals, individuals who aren't able to have a life project. I don't know a single person who has started a family with the person they love and the right person who isn't happy with that life project. Obviously, if you've chosen your partner poorly and you've had the misfortune of that, well, it can lead to a bad family. But the one who has chosen their partner well and has a well-organized and beautiful family, there is no one, absolutely no one, who will tell you that it's not worth it. This sense of community is what binds society together, and its loss is what we ultimately seek to regain. And many times, many feminists, many radicals of this kind reject that, often because they haven't had a good family experience either. Their reference within the family is something negative. And I think that deep down, they want to impose on the rest of the population that traumatic view they may have had of the family environment, or of what a normal relationship is. Not just any relationship, but a normal relationship. They might have had a negative experience with men, either in their family or in a relationship, which can also happen to women. Some men have a poor relationship with women, leading them to end up with a girl. She may have cheated on him with his friend or for other reasons. And I think we shouldn't project that, because in the end, because of your own traumas, you end up trying to make others share your point of view just because you've had a traumatic experience, right? What you need to do is address your trauma and understand that the rest of the world Those who had a happy childhood and a happy family are not the problem. You need to address your trauma and bias perspective and understand that there is a world where you can have a family, you can be happy. Your husband doesn't have to oppress you or be your enemy. You have a choice. Why believe that spending more time at the office is better than spending more time with your family, not wanting to spend time, to dedicate time to your family? It's something degrading when it's the most beautiful thing you can do and the most dignifying thing a person can have. When you say, I take care of my family, whether it's a man or a woman, as a man, saying I support my family, my children, whatever it may be. As a woman, I provide the best care for my children, and they are my little life project. To understand all of this in the end, I am aware that it's difficult and that for any feminist person who has taken this path, going back is hard. When you're already so far along this path, it's tough because it means telling yourself, I've made a mistake and it's hard to fix all of this. And I'm a broken toy in the sense that I've literally been used as an instrument by a lobby. Notice that you won't see Pablo Iglesias and Irina Montero having an alternative family or any weird stuff. They have a normal family and lots of kids, and look, they like that, but then they want you to have a different life project. And I think that many times what happens is that once you've chosen a path, there are people who unconsciously, this isn't even conscious, their subconscious keeps them from wanting to see reality because facing reality is a tough reality. Imagine having to tell a...
On top of that, there are mistakes. Victor, sorry for making a
small parenthesis.
Here, that as you rightly say, you can't go back anymore. There is a generation of people, of women and men to
Them.
For instance, the people I talk to in Red Pill may already have a complex solution in mind.
I ain't.
A little more towards the younger generation. So they understand that your actions have consequences. Feminism has told
Women
that their actions have no consequences. Today's culture also tells men to enjoy, have sex, drink. You have time to enjoy? Yes, you do. You seem to enjoy life, and I do too when the time is right. But we're still doing what's necessary.
I think.
That society today wants results without the consequences that come with them.
Not literally. I mean, what it really wants above all is action, reaction, action, reaction. So nowadays, if you're able to postpone the benefits or postpone, let's say, the reward, do you beat Espodoroso? Yes, you beat 90% of the population. It's very easy because most people don't want to make sacrifices. They've done a lot of propaganda to try to end meritocracy, to try to make people complacent. I want to share something I've been pondering deeply in recent podcasts. And it's also how, even through music, through movies, through propaganda, how have people been made to normalize misery and romanticize it? In the sense that if you romanticize the neighborhood, romanticize the ghetto, romanticize everything around it,
in order to make it to the end of the month,
you're literally telling people who are in that situation that, no, that's very dignified and that's awesome. That's better than being a spoiled rich kid who's doing well in life and really has everything. That it's better for you to be in the neighborhood, barely getting by, struggling to survive. Better.
A better person, more dignified, more humble, more...
All that message
is given in the industry. Hip-hop, above all.
Hip-hop and Morat and other hip-hop, right? But if you're a Maghrebi kid living in Spain and maybe you feel like your only role model is that guy, that's what you can be. He's a trap artist who raps about drugs and getting out of the neighborhood. I'm unsure of the exact number. I wish they had better role models as he lacks aspirations for much more. You know, this happens exactly the same with black people in the United States. Exactly the same. Let me give you an example. Why are Asians in the United States so professionally successful? The vast majority, even more than most, yes, even more than the American population. Why? Because they have a family culture, a culture where they don't get involved with drugs, they don't get into ghettos, they don't join gangs. No shootings or romanticizing violence is depicted, which is not the case with black people, mainly because they have a lot of difficulty having a stable family because there is a lot of broken families and especially father abandonment. But this is also encouraged by their own lifestyle, you know? A lifestyle like, no, come on, man. Strip clubs, throwing money, and a lack of family cohesion are common in the ghetto. But let me tell you something, Victor. These movements.
For example, the black population in 1970 had a family. There was a black person, a black child. Sorry, do you know Ben Safiro? I imagine, okay, well, Ben Safiro gave this statistic. I don't know how true it is, but it seemed pretty revealing to me. He gave a huge clapback to Black Lives Matter activists. Very important. And he said, in 1970, A child born in the African American population had a 70% higher chance of growing up with both their father and mother. That is in 1970. And they had better structure. The African American population was doing much better than they are today. That is, the African American population has not prospered, it has degraded. And that's where all the hip hop groups like Snoop Dogg come in which being a G, being a Blood, being a Crip, being a gangster, carrying a gun here, saying I'm a killer, saying I'm a shooter.
But now I bring this to you. I bring this to today's society. Haven't you noticed that we started to have that same vibe now? We're starting to integrate it too in
our society, of course. And what will be the result? As a result, neighborhoods will become increasingly dangerous. Crime is going to be more and more romanticized. And obviously, there will be a culture of idolizing gangsterism. Ilustrado?
the drug trafficking situation and related issues in Hispanic America. Ultimately, you create a structure where your aspiration is to become the drug lord as they hold the power and control in the neighborhood and within the hierarchical power structures. You understand that this is the role model. So that's literally it. Do you romanticize all of this? Ultimately, the lack of quality role models in our society today leads to problematic outcomes. If they promote values that are directly against a person's development, everything leads to degradation, or they lead to absolute consumerism. These anti-capitalists also try to sell the idea that consumerism is capitalist, but consumerism is not capitalist, it is Keynesian. If someone knows a little about economics, they know that mainly Keynesianism, many of its expansive policies revolve around consumption, you know? Yes, this perspective is more left-wing than capitalist. Capitalism emphasizes saving and hard work. There's nothing else. That's Ancho Bastos. And what happens is that in the end, they've taken a straw man version of capitalism. They sell you the idea that you live in capitalism, but you don't. What kind of capitalism do we have? Do the Chinese have more capitalism than us? What if we had the Chinese capitalist system here? Man, the Chinese have a state capitalism that works really well, and that's why things are going great for them.
Victor, you and I had a podcast that you posted in your stories through audio messages. The topic of Hispanidad and the Anglosphere. I am a convinced Hispanist, but I am also a pragmatic person. I
believe in the
political realism. And really, I don't intend to reunify the Spanish Empire. That's not viable. In fact, first,
I'll tell you this. If you want to reunify the Spanish Empire, keep those plans private. That would be one. If not everyone.
Those who invested significant resources into breaking it up will ensure you are stopped.
This is an example of how I always say that Christian culture always ends up losing against the Protestants or against the Jews. The Catholics, you mean, right? Because Protestants are also Christians. Why? Because the Christian. Why? Because the Catholic Christian doesn't know how to play the game of power like the Jews do, or like, for example, the Protestants do. Because within their religion, having professional development and making money is considered a good thing. It's being with God and aligned with your divine purpose. And this is a mistake that Catholics have been making practically since the Enlightenment. In the Enlightenment, if you notice, there's a part of the world that embraces science, that embraces development, and that embraces all of this. And does Spain remain a bit more rooted in that Catholic vision? Which, let's say, doesn't really promote that part about making money, about growth, about development, and so on. And we stay a bit stuck there. So they benefit from playing that game and even profit from it, so to speak. And you always go around with that poor me face, like, wait, no, we shouldn't benefit. I don't know what. If you don't play the power game, others will take power away from you rather than give it to you. That's the point. I've discussed this with priests. It's a worthy fight, but in truth, you didn't get your hands dirty. It's like, how do you expect to gain power? Do you think it's just going to come and they'll give it to you? Do you think you can defeat the devil with kind words? I think you have to fight for it. That's how it is, because otherwise I don't see any other way. And I think that many times, as we talked about, there are many Jews with a lot of power in many areas. They want to play the power game, but we lack the courage to engage. How can we play if you refuse to compete? The issue arises when you have a religious incentive that leads you to that. Well, it's normal. I wish we had a way of thinking about certain things like that that would allow us to fight, because if not, how are you going to fight?
There's something that really bothers me about the current view of many Catholic Christians, for example, those who support the Conservative Party, who have that vision of Christ. Hippie. That Christ came into the world only with peace, love, resurrected. Guys, leave your riches. Some say that Christ was a progressive, but Catholicism and Christ came to bring the sword, as he himself said. Let me explain. In the past, Catholicism was able to unify itself. All the free cities of Italy, the entire Spanish Empire, all the great Catholic Christian powers united to fight the Ottoman Empire at Lepantos. So Catholicism is combative when it needs to be. I don't have that hippie Jesus vision that many people have nowadays. Christ left clear rules. There's no doubt about his morality, no doubt. On
the other hand, today,
nowadays, there are many very relativistic Catholics, and that really surprises me. Why has the church degraded to that level? The Protestant...
They have told him that he is not a relativist. He is not a relativist. Look, exactly the same thing happens as I told you with China and with the United States. Everyone demands free trade from the United States, but no one makes the same demands of China. Well, it's the same with Christianity. No one argues with Muslims. No one argues with Catholics. But Christianity is always being targeted. Why? Because it's known that it has held power for much of recent history, and so that power structure is systematically attacked. What happens? Well, in the end, you have the Muslims united. They are united. I mean, try disrespecting anything related to the Muslim religion, and you'll see that everyone is together and everyone is united. And also, you even have the progressives who are the fifth column joining them, you know? They prioritize their political views over their roots and heritage. Yes, for example...
Progressive? Sorry, Victor, but one big paradox of the progressive is celebrating Holy Week. Bad, negative, it should be eliminated. We're in the 21st century after Christ, just so you know. On the other hand, Ramadan Mubarak, friends, Ramadan Mubarak, I'm going to respect the religion from outside, which to this day, forgive me, I mean, Muslims know this. It's much more strict, much more patriarchal, and much less inclusive, and they don't believe in gender fluidity. But do you respect her? You respect what's from outside? You roll out a carpet for it and praise it, and what's ours? You spit in its face. Why? Why are they like that? Why are they so... Do you think it's because of the lack of RAM we were talking about earlier?
Ultimately, we're discussing individuals who prioritize their political agenda and pursuit of power over all else. As for the rest, they lack genuine roots. Do they prioritize winning votes and causing harm over doing the right thing? Because if you become a Christian now, you're kind of giving certain signals. I mean, you're taking the side of something that traditionally wasn't yours. You know? We're talking about people who, back in the day, used to rape nuns and kill priests. Clearly, you won't take that position. It's a side of history that's often not taught, and I think it should be. Both the horrors from one side and the horrors from the other are a very serious problem. Victor. The issue is that when the entire cultural sector is subsidized and reliant on the government, no one educates about the Partido Socialista Obrero Español's atrocities. It's a criminal party with a criminal history, and this is not a lie. I mean, just look at the history of the Partido Socialista Obrero Español. It's a party that has killed people and has planned the deaths of people from the opposition. Not only that.
But the main cause of the Spanish Civil War is the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party. And Lago Caballero said, will we take power through the ballot box or will we take power through weapons? This part of history is not well known, and it really grabs my interest how people have a certain view of it. We were all together, naked and holding hands, singing songs to the socialist democracy of the Second Republic. And suddenly, a short guy named Francisco Franco Bahamonde decided to break our harmony and brotherhood just like that. The people think that was the origin of the Civil War.
But why did this happen? Because you have a right wing that has refused to engage in cultural debate. It has refused. It has assumed that its role is simply to manage, not to make much noise, and to tell the Partido Socialista Obrero Español that what they're doing is fine. But for example,
Mariano Rajoy. That's why I say that PP is largely to blame. I'm not praising the uprising either, but go ahead and show us. What happened? The causes. Why was there that uprising, that rebellion? Why did the Republicans lose the war? Having all the industry, nowadays, if you have the industry, who the hell? Can you imagine if there was a civil war in Spain today? And one side has Bilbao, Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, and Seville, which are, one could argue that Spain's major industrial cities sided with the losing faction in the war. Why did they lose? It makes sense. They had the fleet, navy, more men, and everything else. However, it's not taught. Neither the origin of the war, nor the war itself is taught. Nothing is taught. It's just these very, 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 very bad people who came to mess with us, the very, 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 very good ones. Yes, yes.
In the end, they win. If they deceive you about recent events, imagine the deception about the past. That's a
great phrase that I really like, which you said the other
day. 60 years, huh?
No. And what about what happened 400 years ago?
No, that's not true, is it? They can tell you anything, but in the end, they twist the story to their liking. Obviously, that's what happens. It's just like everything else. Now, I always try to distance myself from these things. People often simplistically conclude that there are good guys against bad guys, but the world is more complex than that. It's like there are interests on one side, interests on the other, and it depends on how they present it to you and how they sell it to you. I don't believe there's an extremely evil person who enjoys being wicked and doing terrible things. But in the end, maybe they're just demonizing that person. Because you're on the other side, and you have to defend the interests of your side. And to make it easier to understand, like in movies when you were little, they portrayed a really bad character, so you'd say, wow, this guy is terrible. Ultimately, politics is all about interests on either side. It's a chessboard with narrative and propaganda. That's the nature of it. But I think falling into so many simplifications, I also don't think that the Partido Socialista Obrero Español represents absolute evil. I just understand that they play their power games in a petty way. They resort to manipulating reality and narrative because they have inferior ideas. If my ideas were also subpar, I would need to do the same to win. If you have to compete on equal terms with good ideas and bad ideas, or with bad ideas, or manipulate reality, then you never win in the end. I don't approve of their actions, but I don't believe they're inherently bad people. But I understand that most of the people who vote for Partido Socialista Obrero Español live in a bubble of, is it fascism or Franco? I'm not sure, but many voters aren't aware of what they're voting for. However, the politician is definitely aware of his actions. They do that because they want to hold on to power, and they're absolutely petty. Of course, that's not their fault. No. The only thing is that I try to take away the narrative of the ultimate villain. It's not about how you approach it or how you look at it. In the end, the problem is that the population is more afraid of a ghost. That's supposedly going to drag Spain back to the past. If you look at the recent past, honestly, sometimes it seems better than the future. So I don't know to what extent it's worse compared to the current situation. It's like, I don't know. You've been at it for more than 20 years, basically. Yeah, well, it's gonna be soon, 20 years. Basically, since 2008. That you can't get ahead as a country. Maybe things need to change, and we need to do something else. There are
things that need to be done.
To realize that this isn't temporary, that it's not going to end in a year or two, but if you don't do anything, it's a bad
endemic problem intrinsic to the system. Victor, I want to ask you a question that I think is very important. Do we live in a society and a system where all the big industries are working, or does it seem like all the big industries are working for evil? Hollywood? Promoting bad relationships, if you notice, say, all romantic movies have a woman cheating. If you look at The Notebook, Titanic, the big romantic movies have a woman cheating. The music industry, as we were mentioning before, is focused on gangsterism, on guns, on people killing each other, and on idolizing that lifestyle. We have the media conspiring with the states to give us false information and to make us do things like what happened in 2022, for example. I hope this podcast doesn't get removed, but you get my point about vaccinations and such. To what extent do you think this is just about money? Or on the other hand, can you believe that this is already something more metaphysical, something more spiritual? Is there an effort to keep us away? And to what degree? Could this be a battle for our souls?
Some people have a spiritual belief in occultism, which differs from the spirituality we believe in, and all of this. And I don't think it's anything that isn't already known. I think so. There are people who believe in things that aren't good, that are ugly, and who have to do certain ugly things. So that this brings them some professional benefit, and that exists, obviously, but there's also the money part. Ultimately, I always ask, what causes wars? Why do people create crises? People seek moments of destruction because that's when the most money can be made, especially if you know something is coming beforehand. You prepare yourself, you provoke that crisis, everything goes to hell, and then you focus on buying cheap and rebuilding. The big profit lies in the system's potential, not in taking an existing one. Practically consolidated and whose growth is very little. In the end, the growth might be a lot. The big growth happens when you take a country in post-war ruin, practically from scratch, and build it up again. The process of creation and destruction resembles the market's fluctuations with its recurring ups and downs. You know how you sell at the top when everything is already consolidated. It causes a conflict that brings things down, and then you build again. That's where the big profits are. But yes, there's a spiritual part here, without a doubt. Because in the end, you have a lot of people really committed to, I don't know, the symbolism, to things being a certain way. But, well, there you also have your other counterpart. I think, above all, what people are trying to understand is that they reject believing in something, you know? Because in the end, I think the fact that you believe there could be a God or someone like that also gives you a certain humility, you know? And it gives you a certain, I don't know. It's like you take things differently. Like you don't think you're your own God, you know? Like you're not alone. But there's something more. There's a Lord in your life. There's an aspiration. There's more. There's a plan. There will be people who say, well, you're trying to... There's a really good thing
about believing in God. Victor, I don't know if you
feel the same way.
that it also gives you a certain sense of resilience, of
Tolerance?
when things don't go as desired, even with major traumas. The more religious a country is, this is something I realized. In Venezuela, I met a guy who had literally shot and killed his own brother just as I arrived. To get something to eat. He was super Catholic, super religious, and he told me, everything is in God's hands. I don't worry. I know everything will turn out fine. And obviously, Nora would be left in a state of absolute contemplation about what was happening in her life. She moved. But that state of God can do everything with God. I'm a strong person. God gives me strength. He prevented it from collapsing. And I guarantee you that this can be extrapolated to many parts of the world. People are living conditions that today we can't even imagine. Think, my friend, think that your worst day would be a blessing for 99% of the people in the world? Absolutely. It gives you power. So, gentlemen, just keep that in mind. Let's finish with one more topic, with the question that I'm interested in discussing with you, Victor. Besides your many businesses, you started in fitness, you've continued being an educator about more economic issues, you could say. Did you flee from Spain to Andorra, where you established RAX? Or was RAX already set up in Spain before that?
It didn't exist yet. It was set up in Andorra.
Now, you don't have just the Andorra Economic Forum exclusively anymore. Are you going to launch the Madrid Economic Forum with important figures? Wow, that's quite a lineup you've managed to put together.
Yes, honestly, it's a huge challenge because of the Andorra Economy Forum. It was 1,000 people, which isn't bad, but now it's 11,000 people. Vista Alegre, 2 days, and we have an amazing lineup. We have Miguel Ancho Bastos, Mario Conde, Iván Espinosa de los Monteros, Daniel Lacalle, Juan Ramón Rayos. We have Tamames. We also have Iker Jimenez. We have Samuel Vázquez, Martín Barsapsky. We have everything. I can't even remember everyone we have. I think it's a good opportunity, especially when it comes to fighting the cultural battle and really making an impact. This initiative doesn't originate from political parties or elsewhere. It's civil society that decides to hold an event here with our guts, which is going to cost us a lot of money, and we believe it's important. Because this kind of forum was already making waves in Andorra, but we wanted to do it in the center and the heart of Spain so it would have more impact, and above all, so it would resonate. I really want it to resonate, and for people to leave feeling inspired. From there, realizing that there are more people than you might think who want everything to change. And above all, that we fight this battle so that those in political power see them. There are certain ideas that have a lot of support, that are capable of filling Vista Alegre, and that are starting to pick up a narrative. This will pressure politicians to consider the message as potentially interesting to them.
Victor, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. I think we've had an amazing podcast, 2 amazing ones actually.
This one is better.
Gentlemen,
Thank you. God has willed it for a reason, okay?
has this been a better podcast?
Yes, this has been a better podcast than the first one that got deleted. That's it, gentlemen. To watch the exclusive interview from Club Red Pill 3.0 is exclusive section. See the link below. See you next time. For those interested in joining our community for exclusive content, please excuse the repetition. You have the link below. See you next time. Greetings to everyone.